Okay, intro to shop update of June 8th. I'm going to touch on a bunch of different things here in the shop update. One of the things is I'm going to show you the trailer load of steel that I had to pick up last week, the end of last week, and bring back to Buffalo. I also had a small delivery that I had to make in Pittsburgh. I picked up steel from Pittsburgh, had a small delivery I had to make in Pittsburgh before I brought the steel back to Buffalo. But one of the things that I'm going to show you, and I will discuss it further in the video while I'm explaining what we had to build here in the shop. One of the reasons I kind of show you guys some of the things that I show you is not so much that you're going to be working on something like that or working with that material even, or those tools or anything else. It's just a concept of things that I do and how I do it. Could give rise to you getting an idea of how to do something or what to use to do something. A lot of times when I was working out in the field, I would run across other trades. In my working on the job, you would see other trades. Now, I was not a talker. I would not stop and talk to electricians or tin knockers or iron workers or anything like that. But while I was working and hanging pipe and stuff, I would see other guys doing things, see them use certain tools in certain ways, use certain materials, and it kind of gave me ideas for how to do other things. Not necessarily what they were doing, but it would give rise to ideas of how to use materials or how to use tools, or how I could modify a tool to use it for something that I needed it for. So that's kind of why I kind of show you some of the things that I show you, is not so much because you're going to be using that or building that or doing that, but to kind of give you ideas of things that you might be able to use, or materials that you might be able to use, or techniques or tools. So I'm going to dive into, again, some things that we did here in the shop. I'll bring you back in a little while and explain to you there's going to be some body parts off of the truck that I want to discuss that I'm going to use a certain technique on. So that's also going to be part of the shop update. Even though it'll be going into details on it with the truck build, but I'm just going to mention it in the shop update so that you know. Okay, back at that metal warehouse in Pittsburgh. I've got to load a bunch of 3/8 quarter inch, and then there's some 18 gauge sheet steel in there, plus the expanded metal, some beams, flat stock, bar stock, etc. This stuff over here on the edge that I've kind of got belly wrapped and tied over is actually going to a warehouse in Pittsburgh that I've got to take it there first. But so that's why it's over on the side and kind of wrapped separately or tied down separately. But I'll bring you back. Just going to do, as a part of a shop update, just bear with me, and I'm going to talk you through this. I have people that kind of walk into my shop, and from word of mouth or from however they kind of find out that I build things. So I have a guy that has a detail shop next door. It's kind of a young kid, actually. And him and another guy walked into my shop the other day, and the guy says to me, he says, I've got a boat, a high-speed boat and I bought some new speakers for it, and the speakers are smaller than the original speakers that were in the boat. And he hands me this cardboard template, and he says, this is a cutout of the speaker. He says, what I need is kind of a plate to adapt that smaller speaker into the larger speaker opening. So I says, well, yeah, I've got some metal around, and I could probably do that. I says, how much bigger does it need to be? And he says, well, it doesn't really need to be that much bigger, just so that I can attach it. And I says, well, if it was 2 inches bigger in diameter, would that work? And he says, yeah, that would work. So I says, I have some metal laying around. I had actually bought a drop of this metal. It's 18 gauge metal, and I had bought a drop of it to use for something else, and I'm not going to use it for that something else. So I said, yeah, I've got some metal. Do you want them square, the backs of them square, or do you want them round? And he says, it really doesn't matter to me. He says, round is fine. So what I did is, he needed 4 of them. What we did is cut the piece of metal so that it was like an inch bigger on each side, and sandwiched them together, drilled a hole in the center of it and sandwiched it together, and then took it over to the rotary table on the mill and put it up. What I did is, you see that old pulley that's laying down there? I had that old pulley laying around, and it happened to be just slightly smaller than the diameter of this thing. So I fastened the pulley down. Now let me tell you that I just had my grandson do it. So he we bounced the ideas back and forth off of each other as to how he would attach them, so that he could spin the rotary table and have an end mill come down and cut these things out. And what they turned out to be is like this. Now this is not one of them. As you can see, it's, well, actually this thing probably would have worked. This thing is actually a flange adapter. I'll explain that. But what they turned out to be is looking like this. So we sandwiched them together and just cut them out on the end mill on the rotary table. Just spun the rotary table, cut the outside. Maybe in the bottom of the garbage can you can see the drops from that. And what we did is use machinist clamps, 2 of them there, and 2 more here. And we kind of just clamped these things to the outside so that the metal wouldn't, as the rotation of the end mill in the mill has a tendency of, when you have unsupported material, it has a kind of a tendency of trying to pull it apart. So what we did is he did that, just a little thing. So these are the inside edges left over, and we gave them to the guy. If anybody wants to know what that thing is, that's a flange gasket. Company that I used to work for, they have conventional flanges where you would have 2 flanges that were screwed or welded onto a piece of pipe with bolt holes, and you would stick a gasket in. Now they have something that's called a Vic flange, and the Vic flange has a gasket on the back side of it It's not really a gasket. It's not really an O-ring. Let me see if I can find a Sharpie or something, and I'll kind of show you a little picture of it. So you have a gasket on the back side of it. So yeah, let's say that you had the flange face with the holes that go through it, and then a bolt on the back side. And the bolt goes through. Well, this new style gasket on a Vic flange. Hang on. I'm going to throw this clip in here because I never know who is watching these videos. And when I drew that gasket O-ring that's on a Vic flange, I kind of put it above the center line of the bolt holes. Actually, that gasket is below the center line of the bolt holes. So nobody be leaving a comment saying that I got it in the wrong spot. I just drew it up there because there was space up there to draw it in. So I just want to leave you with that thought. It's kind of recessed in there a little bit. And what it looks like is this. So it's kind of basically a U-shaped gasket. What happens is, and when you adapt it to another flange, if you adapt it to a conventional flange, sometimes the mating surfaces don't mate up. Some conventional flanges have little ribs on the back side of them, and it won't mate up. So what you have to do is put this in there with a gasket against a conventional flange, and this in there, so this has a smooth surface to mate to that O-ring or U-ring type gasket. I have this thing because a company, these things are very expensive if you buy them from the supplier. You wouldn't think that, but this one was actually made by for the company by a machine shop that has a water jet, but he can't get them made anymore, so we wanted to see if I could make them. And I haven't even talked to him since he gave me that thing to tell him whether I could make them or not. But anyways, the thing kind of looked like that. Just thought I'd show it to you. You know, I was just over here and I was explaining this to you. I need to clarify this. One of the reasons there's two reasons why I showed this to you. Just to kind of let you know what I had been doing in the shop or what we had been doing in the shop. But the other thing is I'm not saying that the way that I cut these things out is the right way to do it, the only way to do it. It's just how I did it. It's just a reference to start you thinking about ways that it could be done. Now, one of the things that my grandson mentioned, he says, well, let me just chuck this in the lathe and we can cut it off in the lathe. And the issue with that is let me take this over there. I know that this is way too big, but I'll show it to you. One of the issues with it was because it was square at the time, the squared parts would have hit the ways. But the other issue was, and I ran into this myself, I had used the lathe I had a project probably 6-8 months ago where I had to turn down some rings. Actually, what they were is orifice restrictions that go into a foam system, a foam fire protection system. They were orifice restrictions made out of brass, and here's still the brass shavings are still in here. I had to turn them down so that they would fit in between some flanges, or not even sure if it was flanges they were going between. I don't remember right now, but could have been part of a union. But the issue that I had is when I put them in here and went to press the tool into the metal expanded back, or because it wasn't that thick, and the pressure of the tool would bend the plate back. So if you put this in here and tried to turn it off, what happened was the pressure that you were forcing on this would kind of bend it a little bit. Now, it wasn't quite as thick, that the brass that I cut that out of wasn't quite as thick as this, but he probably would have gotten the same scenario if he had put it in the lathe. The pressure against the plate would have bent it back, and what happens is when it bends it back, you actually get a bigger cut. The diameter comes out bigger than you really wanted it to, because the plate is being flexed back, and the cut is being the cutting surface is moving out as the plate flexes back. But I kind of just wanted to clarify that I wanted to show you this just so that give you kind of a different perspective of the way that you might be doing it. Everybody has a different way of doing things, and sometimes you kind of get stuck into the way that you're thinking of and don't see outside of the box, so to speak, to think of other type of ways of doing it. And that's a big issue with a lot of people today. A lot of younger people that don't have mechanical skills can't see the picture of what they need to do to be able to make something. So I just wanted to clarify that. We're over here at the welding bench, and what I've got is I've got the fender off of the F750, the haul truck build. This is the right hand or passenger side fender, and this is one of the very few spots that there was actually rust on the thing. Now, this metal is still very good. It's just got some cancer through in spots. And here's, so I showed you that speaker adapter and told you that I bought that 18 gauge metal for something. Well, this is what I originally had bought it for. What I was going to do is take a strip of it, probably from here down to here, and take it over to the press brake and bend a small strip of it. The wide is this thing, and a little bit narrower than this lip on the fender, top of the fender. And what I had planned on doing was spot welding it on. And I'm not sure if I'd ever showed anybody this, but I have this little spot welder here. And what I was going to do is spot weld that metal to the back of it. Well, I kind of decided against it, and I decided against it before I used that metal for that thing. Or maybe that was a contributing factor for me not using that 18 gauge steel here. I could use it to make those speaker adapters. What instead I'm going to do is I'm going to get some fiberglass cloth, and I'm going to lay a layer in here and over the top of it. Now this edge is exposed. The wheel well, actually the lip of the wheel well sets inside of this thing. So what I'm going to do is put a layer, probably one layer, front and back on this thing, and then re-drill the mounting holes for it and use the fiberglass cloth. For two simple reasons. It's going to be easier, and I want to try my hand at doing that. So that's what the metal was for, and that's why I'm not using it on the project that I had mentioned in building those speaker adapters, but this is what it's going to be used for. And I probably won't show it in the shop update. It'll probably be part of the haul truck build, but it will be in one of my videos on that. So this is the end of this shop update. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that like button, subscribe.